Today we will talk about life and our coexistence with the universe. We will take the perspective of absurdism.
So, what is absurdism? Basically, it is the philosophical interpretation that our lives are meaningless, but we should continue to find purpose for it. Absurdism originated in Europe by the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, which ideological influence derived from existentialism. School of thought is a group of people with shared opinions, beliefs, and ideology. There are four broad schools of thought. These are idealism, realism, pragmatism, and existentialism.
To differentiate the four broad school of thought, imagine a car speeding down the road. Idealists would say the car is traveling under the law of acceleration. Realists would say the car is made out of metal. Pragmatists would say, is law of acceleration real? Existentialism would say, is overspeeding? What's the purpose of having a law? Existentialism and nihilism share some distinct concepts. That's the main question existentialists trying to invoke to us, to free our mind and start to wonder, what's the purpose of our existence? The ideology of existentialism believes that existence comes before any definition of what we are. Existentialism basically questions our individual choices, purpose of existence, and our definition of freedom. Nihilism comes from the Latin word nihil or nothing. Is the conclusion that life is meaningless, rejecting morals, ideas, and belief, have no significant worth or value. Look at this board meeting. The conversation seems humorous, but it shows the rejection of the essence of life. To further understand the two philosophical ideologies, I will cite some examples. For example, imagine two knives without a blade. For existentialists, knife without a blade is useless, so he or she is owed to find purpose or meaning to his or her life. While nihilism is the acceptance of nothing and the rejection of any explanation concerning to it.
Absurdism is a belief that life is absurd, but we must embrace the absurdity of this world and live happy. There are two philosophers in absurdism, Søren Kierkegaard and Albert Camus. He was born Søren Abbe Kierkegaard on May 5, 1813, into a wealthy family in Copenhagen, Denmark. He was the youngest of seven children. His father, named Michael Pedersen Kierkegaard, was married to his third cousin Anne Søren's daughter Land, and was a rigid religious man who suffered from depression and guilt, which he imposed on his children. And Albert Camus. Albert Camus was born on November 7, 1913, in Mondavie, French Algeria. Camus became known for his political journalism, novels, and essays during the 1940s. His best-known works, including The Stranger in 1942 and The Plug in 1947, are exemplars of absurdism. Camus won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1957 and died on January 4, 1960, in Burgundy, France. Life of Kierkegaard was like a dramatic movie. He often blamed idleness as a root of all evil. In fact, Kierkegaard described his life in four collisions. His father was a wealthy businessman and guilty for cursing God when he was a child. He believed that his seven siblings will die before the age of 34, or the time of Jesus in the cross. It was born for all but not for Soren and his brother Peter. Life is hard for Soren Kierkegaard, especially when he left Regine Ausen saying, I could not make a girl happy. This relationship act haunted him for the rest of his life. There's also speculation that his book, Fear and Trembling, was dedicated to his love for Regine. Either or is a truth of human existence, marked by the distinction between an essentially hedonistic, atheistic mode of life, the ethical life, and leap of faith. The three stages of life. First, atheistic or the life full of pleasure. Youth are the example of this. The stage of identifying yourself in what pleasures you. The second is ethical. Passing atheistic, in this stage, we feel more mature. Life gives us the bigger picture other than pleasures. That is family, children, and responsibility. The third is the leap of faith. Passing the two stages of life, in this stage, we question our purpose and finding the truth. We value more our faith to God other than pleasure, family, and responsibility.
Albert Camus takes the absurdism of Zorin to popularity and further explored the absurd. His two novels and one philosophical essay, The Stranger, The Plague, and The Myth of Sisyphus, significantly had an impact on the 20th century literature. In one of his books, The Stranger, the opening was one of the most legendary on the 20th century literature. It stated there, "It shows us the meaningless or absurdity of life and what consists it." Albert Camus lived a prolific teen life. He played as a goalie at the University of Algiers, have a good sense of fashion, and extremely handsome, giving him successful affair to many women. Albert Camus passionately into bodies of women, sun, and sports. Jean-Paul Sartre was a French philosopher who contributed to the rise of existentialism. According to Albert Camus, there are three ways to live our lives. One is fate, second is suicide, third is absurdity. Fate, like Soren Kierkegaard, we find our source of existence through surrendering ourselves to a higher being. Suicide is the act of realizing that the absurdity of life and we better off dead, but it does a little help according to Camus. Third, absurdity, or embracing the meaningless of this world. According to Albert Camus, his philosophical way of encouraging us to live happy even though life is meaningless.
The Uneventful Life of Soren Kierkegaard. First, the death of his five brothers, his father who greatly influenced his beliefs, his love for Regine Olsen, and his continued struggles until his death, makes a huge impact to his belief, perception in life, and literary works. Kierkegaard also witnessed the rise of Victorian era, which take a significant effect to him and his surroundings. Kierkegaard witnessed the life of Slavic and feudalism, which is replaced by capitalism that threatened the competition for social class or identification. The Victorian era had a greater effect on religious belief led by the nonconformist church that drive for higher moral standards. It also the era of resistance to rationalism and turned into romanticism and myth and mysticism.
The outbreak of Spanish influenza in 1918 that killed over 50 to 100 million people.
Second, the start of World War I on July 28, 1914 and ended in November 11, 1918, which killed 9 million combatants and 7 million civilians. The third is the rise of World War II, which marked up to 50 to 80 million deaths, mostly civilians. The fourth is the Holocaust, the genocide to Jews, Jehovah's Witnesses, Romans, the involuntary euthanasia of Hitler in Nazi Germany that killed 6 million Jews and an overall of 17 million people. The last one is the Great Depression, or the lack of economic activity that started in United States and what they called trade wars or limited imports. This depression greatly severed the economic state of many countries, resulting to unemployment and hardship both rich and poor people. These events, witnessed or experienced by the authors, greatly affect their literary writings, especially in World War I and II, which raised the question of life behind all of the disparities and hopelessness experienced by the people that, as a result, grasped on the ideology of absurdism.